Hello. Hi. Still, I think it's good morning. Oh, no, good afternoon now. Okay. Today's session, in fact, we are going to talk about the bioenergy in general. But let me just set the tone and the rationale behind the whole session today. Apart from the knowledge, I really want all of you, when you go out of this conference room, to get the feel about the whole bioenergy subject. I mean, why we are talking about it. It's only the business which we are talking, or it's also the impact which we are talking, or is it really needed? I don't know how many of you really heard about the IPCC report. In fact, I have just opened in front of me the facts of it. In fact, we are really sitting on the time bomb. Sometimes it sounds theoretical that, okay, it's none of my problem. I think climate change is something we all are perceiving, experiencing. We keep talking about it. I mean, directly, indirectly, that's something different at every level, whether it's at academic level, whether it is at business level, or at any level, even at political level. I mean, we all live in Delhi. I mean, all of us actually suffer, especially at the end of the September, from the end of the September, let's say, till December or something, when we start talking about the stubble burning, etc. So we need to really understand the problem statement first. Because I just don't want to jump to the solution statement, but nevertheless, I think the whole session today would like to emphasize about the problem and the solution. I'm glad that we are not only just talking about one vertical of the bio part, which is very important because when you talk about the bioenergy in general, it's a nature to nature phenomena. Well, I think everyone accepts that in nature there is nothing like waste. That's why we keep talking about bioenergy, and we keep talking about circular economy. We keep talking about the need of this. But I think enough of talking. Now it's a time for the action. Otherwise, what IPCC report says, it's already too late. Perhaps you heard about biohydrogen a lot. When I started hearing about biohydrogen, I thought again it's a big word just to talk about the concept, to talk about bio-CNG, just to talk about many times people think. But we need to understand the rationale behind it, because many times the technology is not matured. Let's say in biohydrogen, still the technology is not matured in a manner that we can just talk about like this, like anything. But the thing is that you have the option. Either you wait for the technology to be matured, and then at that scale you launch. By that time, it's already too late. Or you start working, or walking in that direction at least, so that there is some middle arrangement as such. And we should not just start walking just because there is some shining object. We need to be very much pragmatic. So what I really mean, in fact, is that when you talk about the bio, again, it's a nature to nature phenomena. You can talk about solid liquid gas. If it's biomass, or if it's bioethanol, or for to say biodiesel, or even biogas, even pyrolysis, in fact, and now biohydrogen. The beauty which nature is giving us, almost all this are accompanied by something which you really need. I mean, Corona has really pushed us to a level where we are thinking about health, etc., right? We all want organic food. But where will you get the organic food? When you do the backward integration, you need organic fertilizer. Again, at such a scale, from where will you get the organic fertilizer? You need to go with a biogas plant as such. So as Dr. Shukla was also emphasizing, when he was in MNRE, he coined this word BGFP, biogas fertilizer plant. So it's not just to talk about. As I told you at the beginning, we want you guys to really take the feel behind it, really take the rationale behind it when you are out of this room today. And with this, we'll start. As such, I really want this to be an applied session, because of course we can talk about the research and development, which is very interesting. We can talk about many other policy things, which is very important, in fact, otherwise you can't achieve a scale. But at the same time, here we are talking in an applied manner. So I just want to be clear at the beginning itself, because all the industrialists are here. They know the real pain on the ground. It's not just that, they know the technical part, because especially in IBA, we always put everything in three different buckets. One is the technical bucket, second is the financial bucket, and third is the social bucket. And believe me, technical and financial, perhaps we can still think to sort it out, but unless until social is not sorted out, forget about it. All the time we say, for example, India is a relationship-driven country. Even though when you talk about the whole supply chain part of the raw material, you can have all the legalities in place, but in reality, you need to be very practical. Perhaps you need to make the raw material supplier a stakeholder as well, we always talk about a Hindi word called Sahajiyuta or symbiotic relationship, so that they are also dependent on you, you are also dependent on them. With this, I will open the floor, but with the rationale, with the point that we start talking about what we are offering, how we are offering, where is the gap we see, and how we are breezing it, so that we can really visualize that it's really solving a problem through the bioenergy route. It is really catering to something which is required. And again, I mean, we need to be very much convinced that it is required. Otherwise, it should not be just another session where you are academically raised or enraged rather. And but when you go out, you should be raised from a point that okay, practically you need it, and you see a business model. Because ultimately, if it's not transpired to be a business model, I don't know if we can really achieve a scale unless until we keep getting a lot of push from government side or from other side. So fortunately, we have got quite a good number of participant speakers who have got the vast experience and who are really doing the things on ground, not just to talk about it. And they know the pain. Again, perhaps they will talk about it by themselves. Maybe, Samir, I will start with you only. I mean, you're quite well experienced, and especially I admire your dad like anything. I mean, Captain Saab is one of the gem, like, I don't know, I can't even compare him. He knows the subject, he knows the solution, he knows the problem. I think it will be quite good if you can share the insight as far as the bioenergy is concerned. Thank you.
Thank you, Gaurav. A very warm welcome to everyone here. And as Gaurav said, when you're talking about applied stuff and the pain that we have gone through, so we have gone through 26 years of pain and fun. We have had a wonderful journey in 26 years. And I think I can take it up at four different levels, in fact. So if you permit me, can I just show a quick presentation? Okay, so basically, we are from Melham. Okay, a little bit about Melham. So, Melham is a Sanskrit word. Mail means Maila, and Hema means gold in Sanskrit. So, we have the Midas touch of converting waste to gold. Now you can see the topic is about biogas. So we can set up biogas projects in a decentralized fashion on a lot of substrates. I think you name the substrate and I'm sure we have a plant on that particular substrate. So dairy, distillery, sugar, starch, vegetable, fruits and market waste, anything, this is very easily done. Not a problem, not a challenge for us. You might even see leather waste. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, even leather waste can be converted into biogas. Then, of course, you have the liquid waste, you have leachate, you have effluents, you have sludge. All this can be converted into biogas. And then we do the large-scale biogas projects, more than 100 tons per day. Then you have composting. There's another method of organic waste management. You have RDF and waste to energy, which is handling your dry waste. So lots of things can be done. We must have done something right in our last 26 years for Prime Minister Modi to give us the Garbage Guru Award and some other notable Quality Council of India Award, Lifetime Achievement Award and stuff like that. This one's my favorite. This one was from IBA itself for operational excellence. So that's something which is our specialty, operating the plants. If you don't want to operate a plant, don't build it. That's our logic. We have more than 350 projects all across India. And now I'm talking about a particular scale. We all know about the municipal ward level. A population of about 75,000 to 1 lakh is generating a lot of waste. So this project, which we did for Indore Smart City, is a mini bio-CNG project with its own dispensing station. So it is taking care of 15 tons per day of organic waste, organic municipal waste, which comes at the transfer station. we convert that into biogas, and we then purify it, clean it, that is, convert that into bio-CNG, and we have our own dispensing station where we are able to fill Indore buses. Now, this project has been in operation for the last 4 years. You're welcome to go and see it. Arey, it is your taxes at work, bhai. It's a government project. Kabhi bhi jao, no problem. This is in Kabit Khedi. Then another government project which we did, which is something which is a big pain point for all of us. You know these chicken and mutton shops, the slaughterhouse projects, pig slaughter and everything. This is creating a major problem for disposal by the government. So this is a slaughterhouse waste-based project in Ahmednagar city, where 5 tons of slaughterhouse and 5 tons of vegetable waste is combined, treated, converted into biogas and used for heating and electricity generation of the waste dump yard. So it has really improved the ethics, the aesthetics of the waste dump yard there. Now, what about the smell? Slaughterhouse, I'm talking of blood, I'm talking of paunch contents. Oh my God, it can give people a headache. But why biogas? Because once this material gets into the biodigester, there is no smell. There are no flies. And to ensure that we are taking double precautions, you're even having an auto spraying system, as you can see. And this project was appreciated by even the Central Pollution Control Board officers, who mentioned that this is the ideal way to treat type 2 waste. So you see, I'm trying to solve government problems at different levels. So stinking wet waste. Basically, the smell is coming from the stinking wet waste at different levels. Obviously, once it gets into a biogas plant, it becomes a totally eco-friendly, enviro-friendly. You have a very compact footprint, which means you're not consuming a lot of space. You're going to get biogas, which we heard the previous speakers talk about how you can convert to cooking fuel, heating, electricity, even bio-CNG these days. And then the liquid fertilizer and the solid manure that you get sells very well. Now, in my last 22 years of experience, I can tell you, though we call it a biogas plant, and I'm thankful to Shuklaji for naming it as a BGFP, biogas fertilizer plant, there is more stress, more importance given to fertilizer than the biogas. So we are having questions about, why the rate of Satat rate should be 46 and why not more and things like this. All okay. The actual paisa is in the fertilizer, because we are an agro-based economy. So fertilizer is also the way to go. Don't leave that out. These plants can be semi-automatic, fully automatic. So we are giving a social impact by having a lot of local people around. If you have a project in Tamil Nadu, you're going to have the Tamilian people out there, the local guys there operating that plant. And normally we prefer even the ladies, the self-help groups. So that's how you have a social impact for this kind of a project. And of course, it's a completely covered operation. Some of our projects, the operator can sit on top of the digester and eat his food. And that's a challenge. You can go to any of these projects and have a look. And of course, it's a pure organic, absolutely organic stuff. So whatever you're going to get out is also organic in nature. And organic is the way to lead our lives these days. So at a different scale, we realized that, when you have to scale up, these are some boot projects which we are doing. So this is a project for Rudrapur city. Now we are handling the city garbage, city waste. So Rudrapur, we are having a 50 ton per day compressed biogas project with its own dispensing station and a tie-up with IOCL Adani. So you see, we are doing both. And here, city waste gets handled. A similar project is for Bhopal. Municipal organic fraction of Bhopal city, 200 tons per day from the vegetable market, fruit markets and everything, is getting treated into a CNG project where the buses for Bhopal will be filled up at 5 rupees less than the commercial market rate, but not lower than the Satat rate. Now, all these projects are 25 and 30-year projects. So you see different scales. These are agro-based projects, potato and food processing projects, all converting to CNG. This is again dairy and poultry combination. This is pure poultry, egg industries, and some organic fraction of municipal solid waste. You can make it even smaller and even smaller. So this is for housing societies also. So you see, biogas is all encompassing. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot for giving the insight. I mean, something you need to really notice. He talked about that if you can't run a biogas plant, rather not to put it. I mean, there is a saying कि biogas plant लगाना एक बात है, चलाना अलग बात है. I heard a saying कि in Vedas is written, you don't donate a cow to a poor Brahmin. And I was literally confused. Why you don't do that? I mean, the reason is very simple. That this guy will not be able to take care of that cow. So in fact, आप और पाप कर रहे हैं ना कि पुण्य कर रहे हैं. Biogas plant, as a matter of fact, it's a cow's stomach, nothing else, right? A cow, when it burps, it emits almost 250 till 400 liters of biogas every day in the atmosphere. So you need to be very sure from the operation and maintenance point of view. That goes without saying. I mean, it should not happen that, you are, creating another negative impact by simply blasting the biogas in atmosphere somehow because your system is not leak proof. Then again, this odor problem will come, what he was talking about. It has to be properly packed, etc. And odor is something definitely you can really take care of it. And that's something biogas can really proudly talk about in general. And thirdly, what I really liked about was the fact, and that's what we are always emphasizing, Satat is something which is giving confidence from the market or investor perspective that whatsoever, if you see the whole value chain, the last part is the market introduction of, let's say, gas and the fertilizer. So this market introduction part is taken care by the Satat. Satat is not doing any favor as such. If you can sell the gas in market, in open market at a better rate, do that. Don't worry about it. Satat is giving confidence that OMCs are going to buy all your bio-CNG, whatsoever you want. And that is something was needed. Again, a lot of time we are talking about this push-pull thing. You need a push, but ultimately the market has to pull it. Otherwise, the whole business model will not be sustainable. So thanks a lot. I think a lot of insight. And definitely, I think you should definitely visit a plant in order to really understand what may go wrong, what may not. Because otherwise, there's so much of confusion. Normally people even violate the mass balance. Normally, if someone violates the mass balance, I don't even discuss that further because, it's like abracadabra. Being a science student, I don't even understand that. But nevertheless, once again, so let's take the journey further. And we'll come to the next, Mr. Nek Singh Thakur. So that will be quite good if you can share your experience and where exactly you see the gap and how to bridge it. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. May I please have presentation? Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. So, first of all, I'm Nek Singh Thakur from Biogas Engineering, and I'm engineering head of this company. Little bit about myself. I'm core process engineer, and from past 14 years have been working as a design engineer and knows all in and out of a process facility. And I'm very new to biogas section. I mean, it's the fact, and I would say from past 2 years only, I joined this biogas organization with the vision to make a difference in this sector. Now, since I joined, there are certain things which I have observed, and I feel like there's awareness that also needs to bring in the picture. So today what I'm going to talk about, the good engineering practices that we should follow, and little bit awareness about the biogas. Now, may I just ask a question, how many of you know about the potential hazard that biogas has? But everyone knows what the biogas is. So I think today that's what my intention is, that I want to communicate something that this gas has a great potential to fill the gap of our energy demand. And today we are progressing towards that step, but at the same time, we should not forget about its inherent property and what are the safety measures that we should take. So with that note, I will start with my presentation. Now, may I please have next slide? Oh, I'm sorry. Can you? Oh, thank you. So we all know about the biogas composition, so I'm not going to talk about more about that. It's mainly methane, carbon dioxide, and hydrogen sulfide. So because of its inherent nature, which is methane and H2S, it's highly flammable and it's toxic. So to demonstrate that, I will just show you this graph. So when methane, it is present in excess air or exposed to atmosphere, when the methane concentration is between 5% to 15%, it forms a explosive mixture. So what we are dealing with is an explosive gas, and unfortunately, personally I feel the attention that it needs, the biogas sector, that attention is not there. And when we are growing, we should grow with that aspect that the safety has to be integrated part of the system. So this chart demonstrates that the biogas it's in a flammable range when leaked, and the concentration which I just mentioned between 5 to 15%, and that is always available in the biogas plant. And another aspect is the hydrogen sulfide, which is very toxic. And I'm not sure how many of you know that, but when the concentration is about 1,000 ppm, it causes instant death. And these are some inherent properties of the biogas. Nothing to worry about. This is, if you are dealing with any energy source, those are inherent properties, and it is going to be there. But there are ways to mitigate that, how to follow the good engineering practice to make the difference and provide a safe plant. That's what. So these are the property. Now, what are the facts? Between 2003 to 2009, there have been 13 deaths because of the explosion or some kind of exposure. And the major causes were explosion, commissioning, material certification, maintenance, H2S exposure. So now we know what are the challenges with the biogas. We know there are facts that accident has happened. So what we can do about that? So that's where the engineering solution come in picture, and taking this risk into the picture, we design a system which is safe and follow all regulation. Well, unfortunately, it's not that regularized. So industry practice, that's what I would say. We should follow that. So safety in design, I'll give you one example. There are electrical motors in there. So if there is electrical motor and if there is any leakage, what would happen? There are chances that spark will ignite the biogas. So to avoid that, we do the area classification and the specific type of the electrical equipment that we provide so that the chances are minimized. So this is something that we should do. HAZOP analysis. HAZOP analysis is one of the biggest tools in the process industry. When I say process industry, all process industry, including oil and gas, biogas sector, and that nature is pretty much same. So that HAZOP analysis, normally a person, the design team, during the design phase, they evaluate all the risks and ensure that design has all the safety included in that design to cater this risk. Operating and maintenance procedure, as I mentioned, the few of accident has happened just because of the first commissioning or during maintenance. So the engineering company like us, they should provide sufficient data to operator and educate them, tell how to carry the maintenance and operation activities so that your people are less exposed to any dangerous environment. So that is the intention. And good engineering practice, I'm talking about the pressure vessel, ASME code, all those things which are applicable for the CNG, natural gas, that shall also be applied here to ensure that we are creating a safe environment for our people around and everyone. So, in addition to this safety, there are two more aspects I would like to talk about, which is methane purity. Earlier, I think Praz member, he talked about this methane purity, and that is something which is, right now the regulatory requirement is like 90%. So the energy content that our biogas, CBG, has, it is less than CNG. And our intention is to replace that CNG with the biogas. So basically, if we should try or target to meet that, at least 96% is something which will be, I feel like it's very good and relatively, that's where the consumer will not feel that much difference. So that will also make a difference. Methane recovery, when I say methane recovery, it's like what is the energy content in the feed and how much we are recovering. There's, I think we all, as I would say, most of the people, they are putting so much investment, then we should also put little more effort to extract as much as methane possible to get the maximum energy out of it. At the same time, methane being the more greenhouse impact compared to carbon dioxide, capturing as much as will also have the environmental benefit. So I think in my understanding and our organization, Biogas Engineering, they believe that we should design a system which is safe, easy to operate, highly maintainable. Maintenance is not an issue, and highly automated. So that is what our intention, and with that goal, we are working towards that. Now, regarding my company a little bit, we are a USA-based company, and so far we were working all in all USA project, and recently we have starting exploring the Indian market. So we are pretty new to India market. From past 6 months only we have started, but we see great potential and the gap there which we want to fill by applying good engineering practice. And this is a little bit more when it was established and what services we offer, project management and in engineering services as well. So with that, I just also want to add one more thing. The technology where we deal with is membrane, and all our projects in USA are membrane based. In fact, that is the market current trend in USA. That's what we have seen. And in India also, we are entering with that technology to provide a best solution, which is, I would say, safe, highly automated, and provide great methane capturing capability. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks a lot. That was quite an insightful. I hope you understand, technically we can scale down any technology, but when you talk about the safety, you need to put the layers of safety. When I talk about the layers of safety, it's like onion control. If the first layer fails, then the second comes in picture. Of course, you need to optimize the layers, but you need the layers. So when you scale down the technology, technically you can do anything. But when you talk about the commercial plants, you really can't compromise on safety. Believe me, forget about the biogas plant if you are compromising on safety. And this is one of the personal hesitation I have. I mean, I was working for Shell for many years in refinery in Germany. And I was never allowed to take out my H2S warning system, which was there on my pocket. I had a lot of others as well, but H2S was never allowed. In India, people don't care about H2S, in fact, I don't know. Normally people say, okay, no issue. I mean, it smells like rotten egg. But believe me, after a certain level, your nose is also not able to analyze it. That's the kind of criticality we are talking about. And many times we hear that people go in sewer line and they die. Sometimes we don't understand. H2S gives you something called sweet sleep, meethi neend. When you just inhale it, even for that reason, methane also has got such kind of property. It cuts off from oxygen just in case. So we need to be very, very sure about what we are talking about. Safety is something, let's not even compromise. I mean, nothing to talk about. That's why economy of a scale is very, very important. Otherwise, for the lab, etc., for pilot, etc., we can just talk about anything we want. I think you also talked about the landfill. I think we all know the ill effect of landfill. You can visualize all these vultures, you can visualize all, pollution, water pollution, groundwater pollution, surface water pollution from the leachate, etc. One thing which we don't realize is when food is being grown in Mother Nature, basically we are harnessing the nutrient from Mother Earth, right? So when we eat, let's say we eat mango and we are just leaving the kernel behind, the kernel should actually be, it should go back to Mother Nature in the form of fertilizer or nutrient rather. But if it's landing up in landfill, that's disastrous. We are just mining the nutrient, we are filling the landfill, mining the nutrient, filling the landfill. Perhaps, just to make this, just to oversimplify the thing, we'll have the banana but without the peel, mango without the kernel. That's something we don't realize. The nutrient loss, apart from all other things, is very, very important. As I told you at the very beginning, that you understand the subject, understand the intricacies of the subject, and I think this is where the need of such kind of solution comes in picture, and everything should be, or must be rather, the business model must be intact. Fortunately, you can really do the whole modeling, but again, something you cannot compromise like safety. I mean, I am very glad that you talked about the safety and what kind of layers we can even put at the top of it. Of course, HAZOP study, we can keep talking about all this kind of thing that goes, I mean, it's the never-ending list. But I think with this, because clock is ticking anyways, we'll come to the next speaker, Pawan. I think, Pawan, you have got a lot of experience in biogas field. Fortunately, I also got to work with Pawan earlier. So it will be quite good. I mean, if you can share your experience, especially because I think you are at that stage now where you can really tell the gap, and also where exactly you see people are making a mistake and how can they rectify, or the sector rather, on neutral basis. Over to you, Pawan. Thank you.
Oh. Good afternoon. Thank you, Gaurav, for and the IBA to giving me an opportunity to stand here and speak. I was amused when I saw that against my name there was a word philanthropist. Now that set my mind racing, and see, I have been associated with this biogas segment for the last 15 or 20 years, 15 years now, and I don't see philanthropy coming from a company that is in biogas segment for so many years. On a very seriously light note, I would ask whoever is associated with this segment, solely on this segment, are we making money out of it? Are we seriously making money out of it? So I actually couldn't configure any presentation around it, but I have a few points. Like Gaurav said, we've been working together and I've been seeing how the sector is unfolding. And there are these few points that I would like to mention here goes as follows, One is we all talk about government support. Every activity which we are doing in a country is connected with the society, but the government has a role to play, and we can't keep going to the government and asking for support. But what we could actually ask is what Dr. Shukla also mentioned, or all of us are also looking at, is some kind of a parity of calorific based parity, because here we are looking at two products, both of which are competing against subsidized products. So let us not scientifically look at asking the government to have some kind of a parity, which I am sure the IB and all stakeholders are working on. And there is somehow a feeling which we as people, or developers or private people have, that the government feels that whoever is in business is going to make a lot of money. That's probably not the way it works out. I mean, you have the ethanol pricing that the government has recently made. On a back of the envelope calculation, the companies are making 20 rupees a liter gross margin. Now, a 100 KL plant would be 20 lakhs a day. I mean, the government is not going to lower the price because, hey, boys, you are making too much of money, so let's reduce the price. So that's not the way it should be. So probably the pricing parity should be there. We are not looking at support, but we are looking at the anomalies in terms of the marketplace. And let us also look at what comes in as a feed. In most cases, it's actually a waste. So why we've been doing a lot of number crunching, a lot of IRRs, a lot of ROIs, and the whole thing goes for a 6 because there is a number that you are putting on the substrate, the feed in. So that is one where we have to actually also, we should not jump into the projects without analyzing those numbers and hope the government sees the way to look at it from a different perspective. You are not looking at a feed-in which is free, or like solar, or like any other feed-in for example, even ethanol. The feed-in has a commercial value even otherwise. So let's look at the waste feed-in also in that perspective. Let's ask the government to look at it that way. Now, what is the way out? So the way out is on two ends. One is to reduce the cost. So you've got two costs. One is the OPEX and the other is the CAPEX. So CAPEX, as we go, as more and more projects come in, more and more supplies come in, the CAPEXs will definitely reduce. The OPEX is something else which we need to work on. One is the cost of substrate, and the other two other major components which come to light is one is the cost of power. We are looking at a very, very high tariff of power that goes in. Depending on the technology one is using, you could be landing up with using maybe 1.1 to 1.25 kilowatt hour per kg of CBG. And if you multiply it with the rates that we have today, it doesn't make too much of sense. So we could be looking at some kind of a solution, say for example a solar-based feed-in, which again the government needs to see. We've been working on certain projects where they are not allowing net metering. So that is one aspect that we should look at. And the other thing that came out when we were, Nek Chand and even Gaurav mentioned, is that we are looking at some kind, the word didn't come up, was standardization. I think at this point in time, we should move from gobar gas or biogas to a hydrocarbon. We are not talking about gobar gas anymore. We are actually talking about a hydrocarbon. Now, when you are looking at a hydrocarbon and the kind of levels that a biogas plant is vis-a-vis a hydrocarbon, we are miles apart. You can't even visualize the kind of level difference that exists. So now, Mr. Nek Chand or even Gaurav mentioned about HAZOP. I don't see any concentration on that. It's like after you put everything, okay, put HAZOP also. It's just a documentation, but believe me, it's not that. So we should look at this biogas project as a hydrocarbon project and take things seriously. We've been talking about standardization, that should also come in. So we should have standardized equipment plants, not technologies, standard equipment, basic engineering practices have to be put in, and we have to treat safety as the utmost. Otherwise, it's going to be one bad example will kill the whole project or this basic concept. Now, we've talked about the cost. Now the other aspect is the output that we get. So we get to add value. One is what Samir has been doing, and what Gaurav also said. Satat is just a backup. It's an enabler, and it's a scheme which gives you a comfort that, okay, if you don't have a market, you have something to fall back upon. So now we have to look at innovative ways of selling both our products. One is the gas, that itself, Samir was telling me that they've been able to get an average price realization of 57 rupees a kilogram, which is how your project would actually make it or not make it. So that. And the other aspect, of course, is the fertilizer. Now, we've done so much of numbers. If you look at the top line, we are looking at 75% contribution by the CBG, and say 25% contribution from the sale of fertilizer. But believe me, there is no banker who is going to get a comfort letter from any buyer of fertilizer. You can show him a project, a buyer-seller agreement with IOCL, but very few companies will have a committed buyback on quantity and price, which can make your project economically viable. Now, what are the other ways out? One is selling directly, and another interesting thing which I think Praj mentioned was you do a kind of a self-consumption. So there is, it's become a reality now. Diesel gets converted into CNG, which is now accepted. ARI is working. There are a lot of models which have already gone through the test of time, and they have been certified. So when we are talking about biomass or waste moving, all of those could also be converted into CBG. So that could be a plug-in. And what else? So we could have newer products coming in. Dr. Shukla mentioned about hydrogen, which is definitely a reality. Talking about costs, I don't know, there was you said something like $1.8. I read somewhere $2, but it all depends on what is your reference point. If you are getting waste, we are paying for it. If you are getting paid for the waste, that will change. If you are using power at say 9 rupees a unit as against 4 rupees a unit, the price would be different. Now there's also some other technologies which are coming in. Just a brief mention. You could be your OPEX for purification could be negative. in terms of cost. You could have something like value-added precipitated calcium carbonate through this. There are people working on it, and that could be also something which could come into the near future. But hydrogen, yes. So we should be looking at, as of now, when we design a plant, we should be not looking at 90% as the benchmark or 96% to put the math in, but looking at technologies which will give you a path forward to be able to move towards hydrogen, and not sit on a technology which you'll never be able to probably go to hydrogen. So we'll have to look at those things also. And so what is the government can do, what they can do? See, we are also sitting in a country where we are saddled with huge rate of interest. We can't make a project viable at 10.5% interest as against the international rates or whatever they are. So that is one aspect that the government can actually also look at. We've been looking at mandatory lending, priority sector lending. All that is good on papers, but if you ask any project developer, it is only his background that will give him the finance. It is not the project per se. So we'll have to really make good projects, so that the bankers, at the end of the day, they have to also make money. So they have the comfort to be able to finance such things. So now I would like to end this. Now, if we, like Dr. Shukla said, if we have a parity, if I remember correct, if I heard you correctly, you're looking at 110 rupees a kilogram for CBG and what all, then I guess the term philanthropy against a biogas supplier will make sense. Otherwise, I don't think it's a reality. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. In fact, there are a lot of interesting points which I could gather. So definitely, I mean, in life, I think let's agree or agree to disagree that we need to be very clear consciously about the philosophy. I mean, how do we really want to take the thing further? I mean, forget about all this. And let's say before, if you go back in time, I mean, during the Sanatan time, I mean, it was very normal in India that people, while going to Gurukul, they used to go and just take this bhiksha. And anyone, irrespective of that guy is rich, poor, the the student or even the guy who is giving the bhiksha, it was a part of the system. In fact, believe me, the social work and philanthropy, even all these are the Western thing which came to India. We never talked about social service. Just look at any of the scripture in India. It was a part of our philosophical living. It was a part of the ecosystem. We were taking, giving, taking, giving, taking, giving. I think this is where bio also come in picture. In that manner, only we need to take it further in a very symbiotic manner. So definitely the philosophy and the all other thing has to be in place. Otherwise, otherwise very tough to talk about, because as soon as I say that I'm doing social service, I'm perhaps keeping myself aloof from the whole thing. I mean, I'm just keeping a upper hand and thinking that I'm just giving something away as a social service. Believe me, that was not the part of the Indian system historically, or but anyways, I don't want to go into the philosophical part of it, but definitely standardization is something which is very much required, and one need to understand between project and product. When you talk about solar, so everything is fixed. When you talk about module, you talk about cell, anything, it's a product, and then you make, you can talk about anything. But here, biogas is a tricky thing. It's a project. You really need to do a lot of homework before you talk about it. So IBA has already documented the first draft along with MNRE and a couple of other people, which will be, I hope that, which will be on floor very soon. The draft is over now, very soon for the discussion or for the stakeholder opinion. So let's keep the fingers crossed, and perhaps we can take this to the next level. But that is very much required. I mean, that goes without saying. Apart from this, just a second, I wrote. Yeah, hydrogen, I mean, the subject keeps coming, and hydrogen is something definitely, it will change the way we see. And just to tell you one thing, I mean, I went through this hydrogen report, why it is needed internationally as well, and I was really surprised. There is something called SMR, steam methane reforming. You'll keep seeing this. There is something, through this you can produce hydrogen. So basically you have methane, CH4 plus H2O. It will give you CO plus H2. And accordingly you can just, keep talking about hydrogen. But you can do it through electrolysis as well. And the report was really strange to me. Of course, as I told you, I was in refinery. In refinery, you get this methane through the fossil route. But no one talked about this renewable route of methane. I don't know why. The whole report was not talking. They discarded this route. They said that let's produce power through, I don't know, nothing wrong about it, through solar, wind, and blah, 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 and then do the electrolysis. The confusion is that people will start talking about the same route through biogas as well. And I don't think it's justified, because when you produce electricity through biogas, perhaps, I don't know, the electrical efficiency, the good one is around 42% or something. Discard the heat for the moment. And then you produce hydrogen. I don't see much logic here. Many times you can use methane directly over there. I mean, you are really not doing justice to it. Why people are talking about hydrogen, as we talked about that, steel, cement, all those big industries, they need, how do you say, they are burning fossil in bulk, and hydrogen can really do that. I mean, let's say, I mean, there are a lot of shades of hydrogen, gray hydrogen, blue hydrogen. Perhaps we can think about the same shade for bio CNG as well. I don't know, just an idea, but I don't know. But let's not be confused. Let's be very clear from concept perspective. Otherwise, again, we'll be carried away. So right now, standardization will need to agree or agree to disagree with the draft or all the points, etc. We'll take it to the next level. But definitely, we need to be on the same page as far as the push is concerned. Dr. Shukla already mentioned that with Niti Aayog, we are trying to get additional delta so that the sector is not only being seen from the perspective of energy. You know, there is a lot more. It's a way of job creation, women empowerment, gender equality, all this terminology which you are talking about, we can achieve through biogas route or bioenergy route in general. I think with this, I would like to come to the last one, Mr. Amardeep Puri. That will be quite good if you can share your experience, your thought. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gaurav, and the organizers for having given me the opportunity to speak alongside very respected speakers who shared their insights on biogas and how this biogas is set to take the front seat in energy sector in India in particular. We also heard about some facts and very important topics related to the safety in terms of operation of the units, which is very important. And then we also heard about the price premium that we are supposed to pay for the biogas production. My topic of the presentation is slightly different from what we have heard about. It's about bio-liquid, not biogas. I'll be speaking on sustainable aviation fuel, or the biojet fuel as we know it. So it's the last presentation of this session, and it's just before lunchtime, so I'll try to make it equally interesting as the other presentations were.
So you need to take care of that.
I'll do that, sir.
Please go ahead.
Before starting my presentation, I'll just introduce my organization to all of you. I represent Axens. Axens is a France-based organization. Our core business lies in licensing the process technologies to refining and petrochemical sector. We are also the catalyst manufacturer. We are supplying our own proprietary catalysts to these licensed technologies in refining, petrochemical, and various other sectors as well in oil and gas. In addition to that, we also have a very interesting portfolio of biofuels, and I will be talking about some of those technologies today. This slide basically indicates how Axens was formed. Axens was formed in 2001 when IFP, the French Petroleum Institute, and Pro Catalyst, which is a leading catalyst manufacturer, joined hands, and they established an entity to take forward the licensing and catalyst manufacturing business all over the globe. So since 2001, there have been several mergers and acquisitions that have taken place in order to boost our competencies and offerings for our customers in refining and petrochemical sector. One such interesting merger happened in 2017 when Axens acquired Herté Petrochem and Prozernat. If you may have heard about it, this Herté Petrochem is a leader in industrial fired heaters and furnaces designing and manufacturing. And Prozernat is the technology licenses for several gas-based technologies. This slide basically also covers about my organization. We are strategically located in 15 countries. We have our head office in France, and we have regional offices in various countries across the globe. We have over 3,000 references of the various technology licenses to the industries all across the world. We produce approximately 70,000 tons of proprietary catalyst and adsorbent that is basically sold to our customers with the licensed technologies. We also have a very rich experience in modularization of the units, be it of any scale, and we also do design and manufacture the industrial fired heaters, be it for reformers, the residue upgradation units, or even in the fertilizer sectors. The right side of this slide just very quickly covers about our business sector that we serve. It's oil refining, petrochemical as we talked about it. We are also into gas technologies, renewables, and then some of the processes are also linked to the water-based technologies. This is the geographic representation of Axens in India. In particularly, we are located in New Delhi. Our second office is in Mumbai, and we also have a modular fabrication yard in Vadodara, Gujarat. Now I'll get to the subject of my presentation, and I would like to start with this picture. This picture basically represents how the transportation sector has evolved since 20th century. I mean, in the 20th century, almost all the countries in the world were relying on coal-based transportation for the trains. Then, many, I would say most of the countries in the world, they switched to more faster and reliable electrical-based trains, which are now, considered to be more environmental friendly compared to coal-based engines. We all know about, how these trains have evolved, how the vehicles that we see on the road have evolved. But what about the aviation sector? I mean, there is this aviation sector that has been in operation since several decades, but how they are contributing towards the environment and what are the aviation leaders are going to do in future to contribute towards, carbon neutrality. We'll speak on this particular subject in my coming slides. So before we get into that, this basically slides represents the global demand of aviation services starting from 2000 till the projections of 2070. We see that this demand in the aviation industry, typically, the commercial aviation has been ever growing because it is becoming, more affordable for the people, and it's becoming, it's a faster mode of transportation, so everybody would prefer to have, the aviation services. So it is set to grow. And then, the dip that we see in this slide is precisely in 2020 when, because of the COVID pandemic, the demand of the aviation sector went down. But just after that, the trend is picking up at its expected rate. And by 2070, it is anticipated that the demand of the aviation activity would grow by 350%. And most of the demand is going to come from Asia and, the specific region, the one in the red that you see. So when we are talking about the growth in the aviation activities, it is certainly going to contribute towards a lot of greenhouse gases, which are, detrimental to the environment. So all these responsible aviation sector leaders, they have, come out with the vision to go towards the carbon neutrality. But how to do that is, the challenge. So we'll look out this presentation, the slides in the my upcoming speech on how, the aviation sector is planning towards contributing to achieve the carbon neutrality. This slide is, little bit technical. I mean, what we are looking at here is the CO2 production per year because of the aviation activity alone. And, in my previous slide, we saw that the aviation activity is set to increase in coming years because of the rising demand. Certainly, the CO2 production, the greenhouse gas emissions are also going to increase. So there is a vision to achieve carbon neutrality in the aviation sector by following some measures. The two important measures that have been determined are, the first one is to improve the efficiency of the engines. I mean, you improve the efficiency of the planes, you cut down on the greenhouse gas emissions. But this is not sufficient. You also have to look for an alternate fuel to further, push the emissions towards carbon neutrality. And that can be done by utilizing the alternate fuel, which is, the sustainable aviation fuel as we know it, biojet, that has to replace the conventional fossil-based fuel that we are using in the aeroplanes or in the aviation sector today. Now, the challenge lies that, it's easy to say that the sustainable aviation fuel would, help contribute towards achieving the carbon neutrality. But then the challenge lies that, since this is a relatively new subject, how to produce sustainable aviation fuel, what are the factors involved, and how it is basically, dependent on each region on which technology pathway to choose. That becomes a challenge for the aviation leaders. In this slide, just before switching towards, the technology pathways, this slide basically shows the commitment of, various major countries in the world who are committed towards carbon neutrality. US, for example, the airlines in US have committed to the neutrality by 2050. And the legislations in US have also put in place the premium for the refiners or the industries to produce the sustainable aviation fuel using the HVO route. We will talk about what HVO route is, to produce the SAF and then blend it into the fossil fuel based jet fuel. If we talk about European countries, they are also equally committed to follow the same approach, that by 2050 they have to become carbon neutral as far as the aviation activity is concerned. If we talk about France, they are planning to have 50% blend of SAF, sustainable aviation fuel, in the fossil fuel-based jet fuel that we are using. Similarly, other European countries are also following the same path. If we talk about India, today in India particularly, there has not been, the specific legislation put in place that all refiners must produce the sustainable aviation fuel. But when we talk about, this jet, we are living in a globalized world. If US is following or Europe is following a sustainable aviation pathway, and if they are, using the international commercial flights that will pass through India, certainly they would need to have the sustainable aviation fuel to refill their planes as well. So it's not just, centric towards one or two countries who have the vision to achieve towards the environment. It is the whole world who has to come into picture and, take charge. In India, what we saw recently is that the World Economic Forums, they formed a steering committee which is known by the name Clean Skies for Tomorrow. This is basically headed by several industrial aviation leaders and who have the vision to produce and blend up to 10% of SAF in the domestic aviation. So that is where we would like to start from. And then it has to be scaled up towards, becoming more and more reliant towards the sustainable aviation fuel compared to the fossil fuel. Now, talking about what technologies, pathways do we have today to produce the sustainable aviation fuel? We all know that in our conventional fossil fuel-based pathways, we have the hydrotreaters, the diesel hydrotreater, the hydrocrackers, the kerosene hydrotreaters to produce jet A1 grade fuel. But for the sustainable aviation fuel, the pathways are, it's a recipe of the conventional as well as the new solutions. This slide basically talks about 6 different pathways that have been recognized and certified by ASTM, that these processes are efficient and should be utilized to produce SAF in any given region in the world. For example, in 2009, the Fischer-Tropsch synthesis got this recognition to produce biofuel using the biomass. And followed by that, over the period, there have been several technologies that were evolved. And more recently, in 2018, we saw that the alcohol-to-jet technology has, really taken charge. It's the technology I'll talk about briefly in my coming slides. And subsequently in 2020, this process of catalytic hydrothermolysis was also recognized by ASTM, as a pathway to produce the SAF. Now, we've seen that there are several technology pathways to produce SAF, but all these technologies cannot be utilized consistently in all the geographies. There has to be some sort of guidelines, some sort of constraints to identify the right technology that can be used in a given region. One major criteria to select which technology would fit in for a given geography is the availability of the feedstock. Because for these bio-based technology pathways, you need to have bio-based feed. It's very simple. But where to get that? Are all the countries in the world having all sort of feedstocks available so that you can put up any technology? No. So you have to define what feedstocks are available within a given region, and then which of these following technologies can make sense economically as well as commercially. If we talk about the feedstock availability in India, what we see is that in terms of the waste oil, the used cooking oil that we produce domestically or industrially, and the residue fats, which are generally called lipids, they are approximately 2 to 4 million tons of this production of used cooking oil, all the lipids that happens in India. If we look at the figures of agriculture residue and municipal solid waste, the number is very, very huge. It's like 70 million or 90 million tons per year respectively. So what anybody can conclude is that if in India has to take a step towards SAF, the agriculture residue and municipal solid waste is in abundance to produce the SAF. And the UCO route, the waste oil route, is also something which is in a significant quantity to be considered for the production of SAF. And given the feedstock availability, we have to choose which technologies would fit for India to develop the sustainable aviation fuel sector. Now I'll come on the slide specifically talking about the technologies which are relevant to the feedstocks that are today available or will be available in future in India. These three technologies, they are all licensed by Axens. I'll speak about all these technologies one by one. I'll be as less technical as I would be to make it simple for all of you. The first route is the HVO route. It's oil hydrotreatment route, wherein we are using the used cooking oil, the waste oil, and the fats to produce sustainable aviation fuel or even the biodiesel if we want it. The second route is BTL. BTL is basically biomass to liquid fuel, wherein you can utilize the municipal solid waste as well as the agriculture waste of any type to produce the biofuel. The process is basically the gasification of this municipal solid waste and the agriculture residue, followed by the Fischer-Tropsch synthesis to distill out the sustainable aviation fuel from the pathway. The third route is ATJ. It's alcohol to jet, as we talked about it. In this particular route, we are using the alcohols, primarily the ethanol, to produce the jet. Now, how this ethanol can be produced in a green manner, I would say. You have the technologies to produce second generation bioethanol from the biomass using enzymatic conversion process. And you also have the first generation ethanol that is produced from sugars. Both these type of ethanol can be used to produce the biofuel. And in my next slides, I will very briefly touch upon what these processes are and how they are really, going to change the shape of the world when we see the development of sustainable aviation fuel in India or in the world.
Just a request, if you can finish in 2 to 3 minutes.
Okay,
I think
I'll-
it's more about the impact if you talk about, because technicalities, they can figure it out here.
Okay, so in terms of technicalities, as we mentioned, the first process is about the conventional hydrotreatment of the used cooking oils. We all know the diesel hydrotreater unit, so the unit looks like the same, where we are hydroprocessing the cooking oil and the fats of any nature to produce the fuel. I'll be quick on these slides. This particular slides basically talk about the various type of oils and fats that can be utilized to produce the biofuel, the biodiesel or the sustainable aviation fuel, ranging from very light oils to the tall oil which is extracted from the trees. In terms of the features, this process is basically very efficient. It's a very low capex solution, and the fuel that is produced, it's a drop-in fuel which can be blended directly into the fossil-based fossil-based jet fuel or the fossil-based diesel if we are producing the biodiesel. This second route is the gasification and Fischer-Tropsch process, in which the municipal solid waste and the agriculture residue is utilized to produce the biofuels. Here the solution involves the complete pathway starting from the torrefaction of the feed, the waste that we'll be using, towards producing the syngas from the gasification. This syngas is basically the combination of CO and H2, which is then subsequently purified by removing the impurities, by conditioning it, by removing the CO2, etc., to make it suitable for the Fischer-Tropsch synthesis. In the Fischer-Tropsch synthesis, we basically convert this CO and H2 to the long chain hydrocarbons, and that can further be hydrotreated to produce the fuel of the nature that one would want, whether it is a biodiesel or the sustainable aviation fuel. So this technology pathway is very much in place, and all the refiners are mostly looking at these kind of pathways to follow the sustainable aviation route. The third route, as we talked about, is ATJ. It's alcohol to jet, in which the alcohol, which is primarily ethanol, is dehydrated to produce ethylene. And this ethylene undergoes the oligomerization process to produce the longer chain hydrocarbons that fit in the curve of the jet A1 fuel specification. We require to hydrogenate this product when it is oligomerized, so that you take care of the cold flow properties, you take care of the desired specifications required for the jet specification. And the alcohol produced from this pathway is also the drop-in fuel that can be directly blended into the system. Just to conclude, as we are evolving along with world, India also has to set their steps towards producing the sustainable aviation fuel to contribute towards greenhouse gas emission reduction. And there are these feedstocks that are available in India which can really help India become one of the global leaders in producing the SAF because of the abundance of the feedstock that is available. Axens, as a technology licensor, can help support the the refiners and the industrialists who would like to look for this kind of a route based upon the feedstock availabilities. And we all would have to agree that if we are supporting the cause of carbon neutrality, we'll also have to look at the ground, but we also have to look at the sky, what's happening in aviation sector, and we have to contribute towards it. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot. That was quite interesting. I think we are running out of time, but we'll quickly take a couple of questions. But maybe I start by myself. I mean, as far as the jet fuels are concerned, of course, even the environmentalists, when you ask them, okay, you are coming to US all the way from, I don't know, Sweden or anywhere, you are really producing so much of CO2. So everyone will agree that we should go for it. My only question about this, all the time I am wondering, maybe for myself and for the audience as well, when you talk about this 7566, the specifications are there, I understand. But has this been commercially exploited anywhere in the world? Maybe you can take.
So I can tell you that the first process that we talked about, the producing the SAF via HVO route using the used cooking oil, this has very much been commercialized. As far as Axens is concerned, we have licensed at least 4 to 5 these processes to various technologies. And the one unit which is already very much in operation is in La Mede refinery. It's a Total's refinery. And they are producing this biofuel, the sustainable aviation fuel, via this route. talking about the other pathways, which is Fischer-Tropsch and the gasification route, they are capex intensive routes for sure. And but the thing is that today, in the world, in US or Europe, if we talk about, there are the legislations and the regulations that have been put in place, so that the refiners on the industrialists have to invest in these processes, and they are very much now started to looking into these pathways also. And when I talked about India today, yeah, there is no particular regulation, but when we are globally connected to the world, and the aviation sector does that, will have to contribute towards facilitating the availability of sustainable aviation fuel, so that we remain globalized basically. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. I mean, nowadays we even talk about the space tourism. I mean, I think yesterday or day before yesterday, SpaceX even sent all civilian, spacecraft as well. So definitely, I mean, it should not just be that we are producing or just emitting CO2. I don't think there is any debate about it. So I'm glad to see that. In fact, in our recent magazine as well, we covered this part, bio-LNG. But I would be very happy, maybe, to understand more about this SAF. Why not? I mean, the regulatory is something which will come up. I mean, look at drone, forget drone, look at Ola, Uber, etc. There was no regulation. In fact, government was surprised what is happening nowadays. They had to come out with the regulation. So definitely, I think there is no discussion about it. We can take a couple of very quick questions, because I think it's almost the lunch time. So maybe we listen to 3-4 questions and we just answer at once. Sharma ji, you want to start? Maybe someone can pass on the mic to him. Sure. That's important.
Mine is not a question, it's a suggestion to IBA. Government has wrongly designed the biomethane procurement price in terms of rupee per kg. While all kind of gas prices are in terms of dollars per million BTU, the procurement price of biogas should also be in dollars per million BTU. Why am I saying is because this price was decided 5 years back at 46 rupees per kg, which was close to $12 per million BTU. Rupee has depreciated since then by about 20%. It should have been about 55 rupees or so. So that's a suggestion. You should take it up with the government.
No, definitely. In fact, there is a famous technology, UASB, in wastewater. And I know Professor Lettinga's very good friend. He's in regular touch with us. And he always says that let's not talk even in terms of rupees. Let's talk in energy terms. Then only we can justify the thing. In fact, in one of our magazines, we published his article, and he's very, very adamant about it. He will fight with you, and I will lose the fight if I talk about money part. So fully agree. I don't think, this will evolve, ultimately, because right now it sounds more philosophical, but that's how it is. It must be based on energy. Otherwise, how will you justify it?
The worldwide prices are in thermal value terms. So million BTU is the most accepted price.
Yep.
And all the gas is sold in terms of million BTU in India also.
Yep, you're right. It's not apple to apple comparison. I think that's what Pawan was also emphasizing, that we need to have this apple to apple comparison. Otherwise, it's misleading. Any question? Any general thing? General remark? Okay, that's the last one we'll take, and then we'll call it a day. But definitely you are more than welcome to come to our stall, a pavilion rather, or you can shoot us the question as well. Everyone is available to answer your question, because the whole idea is that at least you understand what you really want to understand, as simple as that. Yes, please. Someone raised the hand, right? Yeah, yes, please.
Am I audible?
You need mic?
Am I audible now?
Yeah, go ahead, please. Maybe you need to put mic closer to your mouth.
Am I audible? Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Gaurav, for providing us this platform. And I've flown down from Ranchi. My name is Ketan Gupta, and I've flown down from Ranchi to attend this seminar especially. Since past 3 or 4 weeks, I've been interested in this the CBG project. Now, as a layman, and this question, what I am raising, is a very layman question, especially to you, Mr. Gaurav Kedia. While exploring opportunities and while studying this project, because of very limited availability of know-how on a public platform, the technical know-how is limited to certain people, there is there's a sky difference between the package which somebody offers in east, somebody offers down south, somebody offers down west. Now it confuses for a layman who is looking to start a project, who is working on ROI, who is looking for means how this all commerce will grow. So it completely confuses. So as an Indian Biogas Association president or chairman, if something can be done, and apart from that, the government help in terms of subsidies like MNRE is giving, few people say no, you will get others. I mean, there is lack of clarity, there is no transparency. So this is one thing which I'm asking you. Secondly, I would like to, this is a technical question. I have studied that cow dung, since I'm based out of Jharkhand, there is no industrial unit, there is no sugar mill, there is no paper mill. So all I will be dependent on cow dung because you won't get that much of agricultural waste in that region. So somebody said that if your plant is based completely on cow dung, that it won't be profitable because the yield of methane from cow dung is comparatively less to sugar mud or press mud. So how true is this? So these are my couple of questions. Thank you.
Okay, let me just take it very quickly. Number one, as far as the awareness is concerned, we keep giving basic training, basics of biogas. Now we are also going to launch LMS. You can just take this training based on your own ease, etc. So we start from zero and we try to take people at least at a level where they can understand. You get the recording, etc. as well. That is number one. So it's already there. Number two, we already have, you can visit our stall. We have brochure in Hindi and English both as far as the biogas is concerned, as far as the biomethane is concerned. That we have done with the help of our German partner, German Biogas Association. That is number two, free of cost. Thirdly, we also do feasibility on neutral basis because this is one of the question which even GAIL asked us. Right now we are doing one feasibility for GAIL in Bangalore. We did earlier as well with many companies. On neutral basis we can do anything which can happen on neutral basis we can do, and this is where in fact I would say I teach in IIM Ahmedabad as well, and this is one of the things I tell everyone. There is a hockey curve. In fact, it goes down, it goes up. On y-axis you have profit loss and x-axis time. So all the business goes through this valley of death, and it's a chaotic phase. So a little chaos is there in any business when it takes the exponential growth, and that's what is happening with biogas as well for the moment. And as soon as it gets a proper push, definitely this chaos will go away within no time. But definitely you need to get the neutral opinion. We can help you on that. That's not a problem. What was your second question? Sorry, I forgot.
I can address.
Yeah, please.
I think your question was about the cost, why you get the different cost from different places, right? That was also one of the question. I think there is one thing which I have observed in past few months. The requirements specified by clients are not very clear. They normally say, this much feed I have, you get me the product. That's the thing. But the offering could be different from one engineering contractor to other. One may be offering you very highly automated plant with high yield following many certain criteria equipment-wise. So you need to be more specific on your requirements so that what kind of safety level you are looking at, yield and equipment-wise also, how much automation, how much visibility in terms of the control panel. So there are so many factors associated with cost. So without understanding that, the cost comparison cannot be done. So as a client, little bit more information to all the player, all the EPC contractor will give you pretty close value. Otherwise, people offer what they have.
One more question Yes, you asked the second question about this cow dung versus press mud, about the energy density, if I put it in a layman term. Definitely, we have got a calculator called Biogas Calculator, a biogas app. Just download it. We are soon going to launch the next version of it. You can simulate almost 200 different substrate. Just download from Google Play Store. So basically, when you do the training, you'll understand there is something called dry matter, there is something called organic dry matter. And if you have got the limited space, let's say if you have got 1 unit of any space, and if you put a cow dung, if 1 ton of cow dung gives you, I don't know, X amount of gas, this press mud will give you 2.5x amount of gas. Why it is so? Basically, it's about the dry matter, because cow dung is also, it's a vague thing, because if you have water into it, let's say you have 90% water, H2 will never give you CH4, right? As simple as it. And that's what I was talking about, mass balance. Okay, you need to have the carbon component into it. Here we are talking about even organic dry matter, organic carbon as well, because this is something you are, or how do you say, transforming it into biogas. So you're right, when you talk about, let's say, 1 ton gives you 40 cubic meter or 50 cubic meter of biogas. The press mud, people talk about 100 till 140 also I heard. But again, it depends how much organic dry matter or dry matter is there. When you talk about kitchen waste, don't get carried away this word, because waste itself is a vague word. During Diwali, you will have more sweet into it. During Holi, it will be more diluted. North to south, it differs. You need to really have the representative sample, because if you are not fixing the input, how do you believe that output can be fixed? It's a very tricky thing. That's why the question is very valid. I'm just generalizing it. Yes, you're right. You can just simulate. That's why in calculator, we even gave this freedom that you can play with the, how do you say, dry matter content or moisture content into it. It's as simple as it. You just need to do the mass balance. Just play with that calculator. You'll get all your answers. Thank you. Thanks everyone here, for being here. It was a pleasure. And we take the journey further. I hope all of you got a feel about the bioenergy, and anything you need, any support you need, please do write to us, write to any of the speakers present over here on the dais. We'll be more than happy to help you out. Anything for bioenergy, as simple as it. Thank you. Thanks a lot.